Alright, so the first step is to scan your object in polycam. I use the auto mode because I don't have to press the button a million times. And what you're doing is you're just getting a photo of your object from every angle possible. You're probably wondering why my camera is upside down. When my phone's upside down, my camera can just get those low angles better, which I like. And as you can see, I just flipped the object over. As long as you have a solid object that won't change shape when it's flipped, you can flip it and then do object masking mode to process it, and you will get all sides of an object. Once you're done taking your photos, make sure to select full detail and turn object masking on, and then you can go through all your photos and delete the ones that you don't like when my finger was over the camera, or if I just shook the camera too much and it was blurry. Once you have all your photos, you can process the object and then download it from the Polycam website. Looking good. Go up to download. I have the Pro subscription, but you can download an FBX format, download it right there. Once you extract the file, it'll look like this, and you have these files. Let's look at what they are. This is the color map, and as you can see, what it does is it takes all the photos that you've taken and kind of splices them together into one color map to then put on the object. And it looks kind of crazy, but you can zoom in and you can see that all the parts of the squash are there in this one file. Here's the normal map that it generates on its own, occlusion and roughness. I don't really use these, they're not really great, these maps. We're mostly going to use the color, and we'll see if the normal is good. Alright, so once you get into Blender, import your file. And here is our beautiful squash. When you press tab to go into edit mode, you can see what's really going on here. We have a bunch of dots. And for those who are new to 3D, you have three types of data that one object has, and that's vertices, which is each little dot, edges, which connect the vertices, and then faces, which is the solid area between the vertices and the edges. And so vertices is a good mode to start in, and if we press A to select all, you can see that we have 53,000 vertices in this one object. Now that's a lot, so what we're going to do is get it down to a lower number that can be processed by your computer more easily, so you can have a bunch of these objects in one scene or use them in real-time applications like games. Another thing you can notice is that if you go to my other objects that I've done and you press tab, you can see everything is these nice quads instead of this just seems like a random mess of vertices. And that affects the lighting of the object. So what we're going to do in this process is get rid of a bunch of these vertices, as well as make them look nice and clean like this. So the first step is, again, press A to select all the vertices, and then press M to do merge, and then do by distance. So we just removed 3,500 vertices from that, and what that does is just get rid of all the vertices that are really close to each other and on top of each other. Alright, so the next step of the process is called remeshing. I use this plugin over here, Quad Remesher, but it is a paid plugin, so for the sake of this tutorial, because I want everyone to be able to do this for free, I'm going to use a free program called Instant Meshes. I'll put the link into the description, and they have tutorials on how to install it, but overall this is a pretty easy program. So if you open Instant Meshes, you can open your mesh, and first we're going to bring in the old object. This is before I merged the vertices together. And so it's still the really high density mesh with vertices that are on top of each other. So the buttons that you have to mess with for this basically is the target vertex count, and then you solve, and then you can export the mesh. So we're going to go down to 1.5K, solve, and here we can see what the geometry is going to look like after we process it. So all these seams here are created by the photo scanning software, and it matches up kind of with this color map. So you see how all these shapes are distributed and stitched together. That's basically what it does for the 3D mesh as well. So we have all these seams and patches that were patched together to make one object. So this is not optimal, and we do not want this. We want to have clean squares. So for the sake of the example, what I did was I did this step of merging all the vertices together, and then once you this is the one with the merged vertices, bring it in here, solve, And look at this, much cleaner. And then you can just export the mesh, extract mesh, save, and put it. I have two folders for my new and my old objects just so I can easily like toggle one or the other off. But so now that you're in here, go to your new one and you have your extracted mesh, import. And the important thing is to make sure that the old object is on the world origin, or at least make sure that after you import this mesh that these two meshes are in the exact same position, because we're going to do a process called texture baking that will put the texture from our original onto this new mesh that we have that is optimized. This is one of the most useful shortcuts in Blender. If you press backslash, you can solo an object, and if you press it again, you can unsolo it. But so we're going to use this to look at the object that we just got. As you can see, we have nice quads, much cleaner mesh, and we only have 1700 vertices total. One thing you want to do, right click and press shade smooth. That gets rid of you being able to see all the quads and stuff like that. And that's looking way better. So now the next step that we're going to do is, so where you want to put a texture map onto this object, and for a texture map you need something called UVs. The UV is basically coordinates that tell the program where each pixel of the picture, like this, maps onto the object. Now that's kind of confusing. It was confusing for me for a long time too, so I'm just going to do a quick visualization for y'all. If we go into the UV editing tab up top, and we go into our old object, and we select all the vertices, then we can see something like this. So if I go here and I select a number of faces, we can then see where those faces are, what data they're extracting from the color data on this image. So we can see that this part of the mesh is taking data from here. And let's see, so we see the bottom right there. If we go to the bottom, you can see that the data is taking from this area over here. And so basically the whole mesh has to have these UVs, and the UVs tell it where on the image map that you've created, just what pixels is it using to put onto the actual object. Now that's probably not the most professional explanation, but I'm pretty new to all this, just like you guys, and this tutorial is just someone who is new to this teaching people who are also new to this. Anyways, we need to now make UVs for this object, because right now if we go into UV editing mode and we have all the faces selected, you'll see there's nothing selected over here. That's because it doesn't have UVs yet. And so what we do is press tab, go into face mode, press A to select all faces, then press U and smart UV project. This just makes UVs automatically. You can make them by hand. I would never do such a thing, that sounds awful. And as you can see, now we have UVs on this, but we do not have a color map yet. So now what we're going to do is make the color map. If you're a boss like me, you have a UV packing plugin. Basically, this just packs all the UVs in a way that makes them as efficient as possible, so you're not wasting any pixels. Alright, so back here, now we're going to do the texture baking process. I have a super awesome plugin called Simple Bake. If you have $18 and you're going to do this multiple times, I highly recommend getting Simple Bake. Otherwise, if you're in Cycles render engine, you can use the Blender's built-in bake system. So what we're doing is selected to active. So what that means is that we're taking one object and we're baking the textures from one object onto another one that is at the same position. And what it does is it takes two variables, extrusion and max ray distance, to pretty much shoot rays out from each point of the previous object onto the new one. So it will shoot a ray out and it will hit the nearest spot on the other object and then say, this is what color this certain pixel is supposed to be. And right here, you pick just which lighting passes. We want to have all these right now. You can also bake like normals, ambient occlusion from here. But for now, we're just going to do diffuse. And we'll start with these as 0, but these two variables are what you're going to change to basically make sure that your bake is perfect. And this was confusing to me too, so I'm going to explain this. It has this button selected to active, which is what we're using. But you might be saying, what the heck is selected and what is active? Basically, I looked this up. The active object is the same. The active object is always the object you selected last. The active object is outlined in yellow, and other selected objects are in orange. So, first we're going to do selected, and that's the one we're baking from. So selected is the old one, and then to active, we're going to control click on the new one. So now we have things set up to do this bake, and let's see what happens. Oh, and there was a step I forgot. So you're going to go to your new object, this one, press new, create a new material, name it whatever the object is. Squash, I can't spell. Go into base color, image texture, leave that nothing, specular down to 0, roughness up to 1. I kept trying to bake and getting this error right here. No active image found in material for object squash. To fix that, what we're going to do, go into shading, click Shift A, and then go search, and then do image. Then you can pull up an image texture node. Click new, name it squash color 1K. 1K just means the texture is 1024 by 1024, 4K is 4096 by 4096. You can do either, but we're going to do some upscaling, so that's why I have it as 1024. And you can leave it blank, and once you have it named and in here, then you can go back to layout, bake, selected to active, and then do bake. So now we can see we have something baked here, but it does not look very great. So obviously something is going wrong with this bake because it does not look like our original object. It has some parts, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on. So what we're going to do is mess with these to figure out what is our problem. Alright, so I had some problems with the baking system because I don't know how it works, but here's what I found out. So bake type diffuse, selected to active, set extrusion to 1 meter, max ray distance to 0. Then when you bake, let's go over to the shading tab. Look at this beautiful texture that is now on our new object. Alright, so this is looking pretty good. You have a 1.7K vertice object that looks pretty photoreal. But we're not done yet. If you look at the object, so when I was talking about specularity, these white areas on the map are when I took a photo, like the sun was obviously shining on it. And then that's how you end up with these specular highlights. And the reason we don't want them is because whatever, like you want to have full flexibility with your 3D object. And let's say, for an example, I'll put a light right here. And the light's on this side. So here from the light, you can see we get those specular highlights. But we have specular highlights on this side too because it's part of the color map. We clearly don't want that because we want our object to be an accurate representation of the fake light and be able to manipulate the light as much as we want. This is also why we want to take pictures of your object in the shade or with diffused light, because if your object has shadows, then when you move your light around, your object will end up having two shadows. You have the real shadow from when you took the photos and the shadow from this fake light. But here, because we took this in the shade, I can move shadows around and the object creates its own shadows that are accurate to the light that I'm moving. Yeah, so just use the dropper tool, pick the color in the surrounding area. Set mode to color, low strength. And I'll just mix these specular highlights with the areas around it. And then what this is doing is it's actively changing the map over here, so once you're done, save it, look at that. Our beautiful photorealistic squash. Alright, and the last step you can do is upload your files to Sketchfab for the whole world to see. You can share them for free, you can sell them. I saw some trees, check out my trees. They're really good. Oh, look at this awesome tree. But if you don't have money to spend, I also have, how many? 114, most of which are free, that I've scanned myself and put up here for anyone to use in whatever way they want. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. Let me know any feedback in the comments and what I should do for the next one.